From identifying a smarter, more efficient way to fight cancer to filing a prestigious IPO, Endocyte has succeeded for nearly 20 years thanks to critical values of teamwork, excellence, and commitment. Endocyte's journey began when Philip Lau, a distinguished professor at Purdue University, challenged conventional wisdom of plants rejecting vitamins via endocytosis. After proving endocytosis was in fact possible in plants, Lau's team investigated whether vitamins might also enter animal cells by endocytosis. After Chris Lehman joined Lau's lab as a graduate assistant, he and Lau began research on attaching folate to cells. They also discovered that this folate could carry attached cargo. Immediately, Lau conceived of attaching cancer drugs to target overreactive folate expressions on cancer cells and work more efficiently.
So this immediately changed our focus to development of therapies for cancer and imaging agents for cancer. And the initial emphasis was that, at least I decided on, was to focus on folic acid, because as we looked at the other vitamins, they did not have this cancer specificity.
In actuality, it would take more than a decade of additional research before the discovery would be moved to human trials. What didn't take long was finding investors interested in the results.
As I published on this, I began to receive inquiries from venture capitalists wanting to start a company. And I didn't even know what a venture capitalist was. I hadn't heard the term before.
Lau's father and brother put him in touch with Jack Clausen, former CEO of Hillrom, an Indiana-based healthcare technology company.
And I went to him solely to ask for his advice, not to ask for his involvement. I wanted to know what venture capitalists were like. Should I trust them? Should I take their money? Should we start a company? And so forth. Jack listened to the spiel and then called me back 2 days later and said, "I'd like to start a company."
In 1995, Clausen and other investors raised $1.5 million and suggested someone to serve as CEO, Ron Ellis, then a vice president at Hillrom.
Well, conceptually, first off, all great discoveries and ideas conceptually, I think, are quite simple and they make sense. And this is exactly that. I mean, we have the means of delivering potent drugs to cancer cells and not to normal cells. That's going to reduce toxicity and provide a better therapy. So it was clearly an unmet need, and it was a sensible and logical approach as a way to solve it. So we were, I think I was very excited and impressed with the technology. But, you know, I told my wife, as we talked about it, that I viewed it as just kind of once in a lifetime chance to do it. These opportunities don't come along every day. And I said, I think I'd always regret it if I didn't try. And see if we could do something that would help cancer patients develop a new technology, build a business from the ground up. All those things were really, really appealing.
After Ellis became CEO, he found it a huge adjustment from the corporate culture to which he was accustomed.
You know, $1.5 million, I realized, was not a lot of money, so I was going to be careful. I bought a computer, and I bought a chair at Staples to sit in. And everything else we drug out was used, found, Goodwill. You know, everything we could put in was placed in very sparse. This is a kind of a culture shock, and it was also, you know, it was kind of lonely. You know, you're used to interacting with people all day, and you come in and it's just you. And I remember Thursday was Phil's research day. And I remember looking forward to Thursday. That was kind of the big day because I got to go to Purdue. I got to see some people and talk to them, see how the research was going. Then I'd take myself out to lunch at the Union, and I'd go back to the office and go to work on, you know, on handling some of the development activities. But yeah, it was different, good in a lot of ways, but a big change.
As Endocyte's growth continued in the late 1990s, Ellis and Lau persuaded Lehman, who had since earned his PhD and entered the private sector, to return to the research he had started.
I received a phone call from Phil. He says, "Chris, He goes, Endocyte, we're trying to get it moving along. He goes, but it looks like we're very close to signing our first corporate sponsored deal for doing targeted gene therapy. And he goes, it looks like we're going to have to commit to doing quite a bit of work. Problem is, we don't have anybody to do the research here. And so he said to me, and I remember these words very vividly, he goes, Chris, why don't you return here and finish what you started? And, it was very humbling to hear that. And, I was very proud that, he would call me back up and want me to be associated with this new venture. Obviously I did. I returned to help get the company moving and to direct the research.
Endocyte continued to build scientific and support teams using the highest standards.
The scientists we have are, I think, world class. We are the best in the world in small molecule drug conjugation technology, or developing this technology. We publish more, we have more patents, we know more than anything else. We've built a very strong development organization in regulatory affairs and CMC and in clinical. And the next stage that will hopefully occur shortly is we'll start building a commercial organization. And we'll go under the same formula we've used before. Take the time to find the very, very best people you can find, even if it means taking a few more months to do it and do it right.
As Endocyte entered the new millennium, the company further expanded its capabilities, staff, and achievements.
Well, my regular routine, basically I manage a small group of people who focus on the information program projects. So I oversee day-to-day operations, design experiments, studies, to make sure that we can use the process well to select or solidify our lead compound. One of Endocyte's other major objective is to build pipelines of drugs. So for the information program, which I'm leading the program, we are trying to develop drugs for treatment of like autoimmune diseases. So like rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, Crohn's disease.
I've been here 10.5 years. So I started in July of 2000 as a QA/QC associate, doing audits, safety assessments in the labs, and then worked on regulatory submissions. And then when we started some of our clinical trials, did clinical research associate tasks, and then moved into data management as we brought an in-house data management system in-house, and that was 2003. So since then I've been doing all the data management work with Endocyte.
My role at Endocyte is, there's quite a few things that I do at Endocyte. One, my primary job is to develop test methods to test the compounds that Endocyte makes to ensure that they are safe, so that they are the highest purity, to make sure that we know exactly what the compound, all of the characteristics of the compounds that we make, so that I have methods that are available to test our compounds, and then also to transfer those methods out to outside labs whenever we've exceeded the capacity of our lab to be able to generate the data.
I oversee the clinical operations group, which is responsible for the management of all of Endocyte's clinical trials. Well, for the clinical operations group, I think in particular, there isn't a typical day because we're dealing with our investigator sites. Every day is a different problem or a different issue, and so we're sort of always in the position of having to respond to whatever problem has come up for that day.
In 2005, Endocyte moved to a custom-designed space in the Purdue Research Park. The move allowed Endocyte to ramp up clinical trials of its leading drug, EC145, which was invented in 2004 and entered trials in 2006.
So 3 years ago when I first started, we had 2 single-arm phase 2 trials with EC145 that were ongoing. Since then, we designed a randomized phase 2 trial in platinum-resistant ovarian cancer. And that disease is extremely hard to treat. So there's actually never been a phase 3 trial that's shown any benefit for those patients. What we were able to do was design a sound trial that's very similar to what we're going to do in phase 3. And because the drug is effective and EC20 is able to select patients, we had a terrific outcome. The final results will be presented shortly, but I'd say that's an enormous milestone for the company.
During 2007, Endocyte secured $30 million in financing. That same year, Michael Sherman was named Endocyte's Chief Financial Officer, laying groundwork for the IPO on Wall Street in 2011.
Right, in that as I first came on board, the idea was you need a CFO to prepare you to go public. Honestly, the first few years I was here was really not about preparing to go public. It was always in the back of our mind, and there are certain elements of infrastructure and control you want to have in place. There are also certain members of the investment community that you want to begin to build a relationship with in advance. So that work was going on, but I think for the most part, and somewhat surprising to me, my focus was as much on sort of pitching in to help the company achieve the milestones, whether they're clinically oriented or otherwise, to get us to the point where we were mature enough that an IPO path was one that made sense and the markets would be receptive to.
A long way from its startup beginnings, Endocyte now employs a staff of 60 professionals, and trials have been initiated for new drugs targeting advanced kidney cancer, among other diseases. Endocyte's teamwork, excellence, and commitment is certain to ensure success for another 2 decades and beyond.
We're here because we love the work. The work is meaningful, it's important, it's challenging, and I'm committed to it. I've always had a feeling, maybe you call it an assurance, that the company is going to be successful. And it's taken longer to get where we are and more money than I thought it would be. But that assurance and that the company's going to be successful is in large part is built around, I believe in the technology. And I believe in the people at Endocyte. And I believe, as I've watched them overcome challenge after challenge, that no matter what's thrown at us, we will find a way to be successful.